Welcome back to Simplifying the State, the podcast where we break down politics so you don't have to try to figure out why the French government has collapsed yet again, and why when Emmanuel Macron appoints a new prime minister, supposedly later this week, France will have gone through 5 prime ministers in the last 2 years. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. So as always, I am Adam Watson. You may notice Nicholas is not here, and that's because this is a little special episode that we have. So in a few seconds, you'll hear my conversation with Missouri State Rep Ian Mackey. We talked about a number of things, including the recent bill which bans cell phones in all Missouri schools. We also talked about what might be next for him in politics at the end of this, which is his final term as a Missouri State House rep. And also, kind of the Republican effort to gerrymander Missouri, possibly gain another House seat in the midterms. Here is that conversation now. Welcome, Representative Mackey. Thank you so much for sitting down to talk.
Sure, happy to be here.
Okay, so obviously there is a new phone ban in Missouri, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk with you about today. So my first question is, you voted in favor of the bill, which included the phone ban. Would you be willing to maybe kind of take us through your motivations and your reasons for voting in favor of this bill?
Sure, yeah. So for a little while during session, the cell phone ban was a standalone piece of legislation. And as a standalone piece of legislation, it wasn't something that I supported. I didn't think that it needed to be in state policy. I thought schools were doing a pretty good job of handling that decision and that policy at a local level when it came to cell phone use. But as often happens, especially on our education bills, all of us, there's 163 in the House and 34 in the Senate, and we all have ideas for how to improve our schools and how to improve our education system. And so what ended up happening was a lot of different ideas all started getting piled together into one big omnibus education bill. And that included mostly good things. Almost everything in there was stuff I agreed with. There was a curriculum change around reading that I didn't agree with. There was a cell phone ban that I didn't agree with, but neither of those were such strong disagreements that I felt I could oppose the bill. And in fact, I actually had language in that bill to prohibit schools from using zero tolerance discipline policies when they're disciplining students for various actions. Lots more reasons to support that bill than not support it. And so, when it was written about, when the press was, sharing their stories about it and there were headlines made about it, it obviously became known as the cell phone ban. Some of the chief sponsors of that bill were also sponsors of that standalone legislation. I think it was one of the first pieces put into that bill. And obviously it was something that affected every district and got a lot of folks' attention. So it became known as the cell phone bill, but it was way, way more than that.
Yeah. So could you sort of, I'm not sure if you 100% know the reason, but could you share why the ban was for the whole day, including lunch and free periods, as opposed to more harsh language when it comes to class time? Like why it's a full day cell phone ban, if you know the reason?
Yeah, that's probably a better question for the sponsors of that bill. I mean, you can search, and I can help you with that if you need to, but you could search the House website and find that standalone cell phone bill before it became this big bill. And I know on the Democratic side, one of the sponsors of that standalone bill was Kathy Steinhoff, a retired teacher from Columbia. And I don't remember, if her language had those carve outs or not. But, the other sponsors of that legislation, they would be able to articulate why they felt the need to say a total ban from the beginning of the day to the end. I don't really have enough information to speak on their behalf, especially because I was opposed to it in its standalone form. So I'm probably not the right person to ask. I absolutely don't think a ban is necessary, particularly when students are on free time. And, when you guys at Clayton have an open campus, I mean, the idea that your cell phones would be policed as you're going out to lunch or sitting outside in the grass or whatever else you might be doing is just, silly, really.
Yeah.
And I know you all are texting from your laptops anyway, because I talked to the parents.
Yeah, no, we've certainly gotten some workarounds around that, and that's become like a pretty common thing.
Well, and that's the case with I know you're talking about the cell phone ban specifically, but as somebody who's been down there for 7 years, there's a lot of different bills around the adults, and most of them are geriatric in Jefferson City, and their ideas about how to regulate through state law the interactions of youth, children, young people, and technology. It's just could not be more ignorant sometimes. It's
Yeah.
just such a disconnect. The idea that they wouldn't think you guys could text from your laptops.
Right.
And so many of the other ideas that we see and they come from good places. They come from wanting to keep you guys safe and wanting to keep you guys engaged in school. Their motivations are definitely above board and terrific, but their way of executing it and trying to figure out, I think you guys could probably teach them a lot more about technology and a lot more about how to be safe on technology and how to use technology responsibly than they're ever going to be able to teach you because they don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Kind of getting to that point. I understand the point that they make often that phones can distract from education. But do you feel, or did you feel when you were voting that there should be exceptions when phones might be used as like educational tools, such as photojournalism, recording interviews? Like for our journalism class, we use our phones a lot to record stuff, and using as reference tools in other class appropriate activities. Was that something that you and some of your colleagues who didn't support the phone ban but overall voted for the bill felt? Or
So I think those exceptions are in the bill. If I'm not mistaken, I think the educational exceptions are still in the bill. So, a teacher, I assume probably there's a process or policy for a teacher to either have an ongoing standing sort of exception or to have an exception for a certain assignment. And I don't think any of that is prohibited under the language.
Okay. Yeah, I think I may have misread the Clayton policy, but I'm not sure I saw anything about any like educational exception. I think I saw unless directed by a teacher, although I'm not sure 100% if that can be
Yeah.
like
So
a
I think that is
long-standing thing
the
or...
educational exception. That language
Oh,
of
okay.
directed by a teacher. Yeah. That's
Right.
saying a teacher has decided that they need or they want to use the phones for an educational purpose, and then they're allowed to do that.
Right, I know. Yeah, because I don't think teachers have really talked about that much, primarily because I think, it was passed and then there was like a kind of a chaotic process where the teachers didn't really get any training because of the time in between the passing and then in between the lawyers interpreting what it meant and then the districts interpreting what it meant and all that stuff. But yeah. Mobile phones have kind of become an essential way to communicate in our lives. You kind of talked about, particularly during emergencies, such as the tornado we had here in St. Louis last May. Do you see a total phone ban as something that, might generate more anxiety among students, knowing that they have limited ability to communicate during emergency circumstances?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think that's one reason why the ban doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, I think most adults are probably just, adults who support it, the bill sponsors, maybe even some of them too, just a little hypocritical to think that it's okay to use our phones all day and be connected to the outside world and talk about what's going on outside of the four walls that we're confined in, but it's not okay for young people or students to do that. It's I think just hypocritical and unrealistic.
Yeah. Kind of moving in the same direction as that safety issue, though. I'm sure you know, the recent school shooting in Minnesota, many others, gun violence in schools is top of mind for me, so many of my other peers and such. I wanted to know what your take was on this bill, which, there are a lot of stuff, there's a lot of stuff in it about school safety situations, which, this bill certainly aimed at school safety, certainly focuses on the threat of phones, but also kind of does nothing to focus on the threat of guns or weapons or other stuff like that on school campuses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Sorry.
so yeah, that is definitely the thinking of folks, the people who control Jefferson City, the party and the folks who run it that are in control and in charge down there have zero interest in getting anywhere near any sort of common sense gun reform legislation. And so, their ideas of keeping you safe involve anything other than doing anything about the prevalence of guns and assault weapons and easy access that even kids have to those weapons. They're not going to touch that at all because it's politically complicated for them to do so. It's much easier to ban your cell phones.
Yeah, much easier to find something that they can easily ban, get a win, than do something that's more comprehensive, that's kind of more of an issue for people. Yeah. So some states and other school districts, including Texas, are requiring lock boxes or mandatory confiscation of phones at the door. I know that was not included in the language of the bill. Do you know if that was something that was proposed as it was being debated, or the education bill as a whole was being debated?
I don't remember a lot of conversations around that specific piece. I'd have to go back and look at some of the standalone bills to see if they included something like that. And that's really prescriptive. And we really don't, even when we pass, and this bill is probably one of the strictest all out bans that affects every district. But, generally, we are not a state that tells schools exactly how to do something or exactly what to do, even if we're, in the instance of this ban, we're not really a state that goes into great detail about telling schools how they should be going about following the law. We're a really locally, for the most part, local control is really how our schools are run. You have states where the governor has got a lot of control over the schools. That's not the case here. You've got states where mayors have lots of control over schools. That's not the case here. Our school boards really run their districts. And so, the case here and in most instances, they're given discretion to figure out how they want to implement.
Yeah. Real quick, though, moving away kind of from this bill, as you know, this is kind of prevalent given the recent news. As you know, at the president's request, the governor has called a special session of the Missouri legislature to consider a mid-decade redistricting of House seats. Under the Republican proposal, Democrats could potentially lose a House seat, specifically Emanuel Cleaver's in the 5th District. What's your perspective on this, and how do you and your colleagues possibly plan to approach it?
Yeah, I think it's clear that the reason why they're doing it mid-decade for the first time ever in our state is because they are afraid they're going to lose the next election nationally. They're afraid they're going to lose the House of Representatives. They're going to lose Congress. That means Democrats control the Oversight Committee. That means Democrats begin investigating Donald Trump and his administration, the way every House Oversight Committee has done since the beginning of our country to whoever is in the other branch of government. That's their job. That's what they're going to do. But they're terrified of that. And so they're going to do everything they can to try to hold power, including changing the rules of the game midway through the game. Think about any game you've played, board game with friends. I don't know about you. I like board games. I like to play cards too. And there's always, it doesn't matter how old you get, there's always somebody at the table. They get so mad because they're losing. They just start changing the rules. They start saying, no, that's not a rule. No, this is the rule. No, no, the rule is this. And they blame the game, right? They blame the game. Right. They blame the rules. And then they try to change them because they just can't stand losing. They cannot stand the thought of losing. And that's what they're doing. And so, they'll succeed. They'll get it done. It'll be challenged in court. I have hope that there's a lot of reasons why the court would throw this out. Most specifically, the fact that they're using census data from 2020 to draw maps in 2025. I think that's pretty cut and dry illegal. So hopefully for, that and maybe other reasons it gets tossed out. But the reason they didn't do this in 2022, 3 years ago, was because they were afraid of making these districts too competitive. There are Democrats in Missouri. We do make up about 40% of the population. And, these districts, Emanuel Cleaver will have a fight on his hands to hang on to the seat. He may or may not prevail. Whether or not he wins under the new lines, I think most folks understand that if we had another year like 2008, or if we had another year where, especially as Trump's leaving the White House, hopefully, if that's what he does this time, Democrats see gains. You could end up with 5-3. You could end up with 3 Democratic elected members from Missouri, and not just 2 like we have now, and not just the one like they hope for, because they're going to end up having to make these districts more competitive. So, despite already in 2022, and cooler heads prevailed in their caucus, and they decided to keep the 6-2 map, and now they're going down this road, and they may regret it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It just kind of seems, if you think about it for more than 10 seconds, it's insane that they're allowed to do this, like that they're allowed to change the districts midway through the decade to pick up a House seat in Texas or pick up a House seat in Missouri or any other state. But really, for any side, just redistricting doesn't really seem like it should be allowed mid-decade, but,
Yeah, I totally agree. And they point to all the, other states like Illinois that are gerrymandered for Democrats, and that's true. The difference is we did it at the right time. We followed the rules. We did it when everybody does it. Doing it midway through, that's what's unprecedented and really embarrassing and really shouldn't stand.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is your last term in the Missouri House of Representatives. I'm sure many people are wondering maybe what's next for you in politics. Have you considered running for another office, like maybe the House seat in St. Louis that we have here, the first U.S. House seat, or do you kind of see this as the end of your political career, or do you maybe look at going to the Missouri Senate? What do you think might be next for you after this term?
Yeah, no immediate plans to run for the state Senate or the U.S. House seat. You know, a big supporter of Wesley Bell and the job he's doing in Congress, and I have a gentleman named Steve Butts who's been in the House with me for the last several years, who's running for the state Senate seat, who I support strongly. So no interest in that at all. But I'll stay involved in politics. Before I was elected, I was managing folks' campaigns, helping them run for office, and I plan to continue to do that afterwards.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today about all this stuff. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to Simplifying the State. We hope you enjoyed this episode with our special guest, Ian Mackey. If you did enjoy the episode, please be sure to rate it. It would mean a lot to us if you did. It would also mean a lot if you followed the show wherever you're listening to it, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever. You never know who we're going to be talking to or what we're going to be talking about, so it's always a good idea to stay in the loop, follow the show, get notified whenever a new episode drops, and then to listen to that episode immediately, whatever you're doing. Even if you're in the middle of a test, just start listening to the episode immediately. Ignore the dirty looks from the teachers, because in my personal unbiased opinion, it's totally worth it, because this is the greatest piece of media ever created in the history of ever. It would also mean a lot to us if you would share this podcast with any friends, family, just anybody you think would enjoy it. It could even be a random stranger on the street you see who looks like they want a fun podcast about politics, civics, and government and all that stuff. Okay, so we'll be back with our next episode soon. Talk to you guys then.